Hello everyone, for this episode of REDUX. I realized I was pronouncing it wrong. It's REDUX, not Redux. Anyway, I've never heard it said before. I've seen it written all the time. Anyway, for this episode of REDUX, we're going to talk about many of the comments that I got on my recent video called Transgender, where I attempt to argue that being transgender is not people looking for attention, it's not people playing dress up, it's a legitimate identity. And like always, there were a lot of trends in the comments, so I'm going to cover several of those trends. So one of the things that a lot of people brought up in the comments of the video is this idea about being born in the wrong body. A lot of people describe being trans as a mental disorder, and a lot of people point to the fact that medical organizations identify gender identity disorder as an actual disorder. So they're like, even the medical community says that being trans is a disorder. So gender identity disorder, or gender dysphoria, is in fact, at least by the American Medical Association and probably some other associations, it is listed as a disorder. The word dysphoria means a profound discomfort or unease. So gender dysphoria is a state of being profoundly uncomfortable with the gender that you were assigned at birth. A lot of people use the phrase born in the wrong body, but honestly, I think that might be antiquated. I mean, the trans community and other people can sort of correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I haven't heard anyone use that terminology and that phrasing recently, just as society and people have come to a better understanding of what it means to be trans. People that are uncomfortable with the gender that they've been assigned, and so much so that it causes them distress and makes them unable to live their lives normally. That's gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder. Now, the thing that all those people that make this comment are missing is not all trans people have gender dysphoria. There are many trans people who are perfectly happy with their bodies, and I don't have the data on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's as many, if not more, trans people that don't have gender dysphoria than the other way around. So if you're like using the terms transgender and gender identity disorder interchangeably, you're doing that wrong. Those words do not mean the same thing. Some trans people have gender dysphoria and some don't. So that's not the definition of being trans. So you can't say, even the doctors say that being trans is a medical disorder, because you're using the wrong term. And even among the people that do have dysphoria, what you have to understand is dysphoria does not mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're a crazy person who's making things up. There's lots of types of dysphoria, and there's lots of conditions that can cause dysphoria. For example, stress can cause dysphoria. Insomnia can cause dysphoria. Nobody accuses stressed out people or insomniacs of being mentally ill. It just means that their brains are working in a way that's causing them personal distress. There are some trans people who feel very uncomfortable with their gender, and then there are trans people who desire to actually switch sexes. In the media and news, you often hear the words transsexual. I'm not sure if that's a word that's used that much in the trans community. I could be wrong, but these are people who want their social appearance as their gender to match their biological sex. That's a completely different issue than just someone who doesn't identify with the gender that they were given at birth. Which sort of brings me to the next point, and it's crazy that I keep having to reiterate this. Like, people just refuse to acknowledge the difference between sex and gender. And at some point, I don't know if it's worth it for me to even bring this up, because it seems like it's more of a stubborn thing, because no matter how much you explain, people still come back at you saying, no, you can't change your sex is the same thing as your gender. It's more of a stubborn thing where people refuse to acknowledge it, even though the medical community acknowledges it, sociologists acknowledge it, psychologists acknowledge it. Some people are just too stubborn. So to some extent, I feel like kind of dumb like reiterating this, but I'll go over it anyway. Once again, sex is just your biology, what genitals you have, what chromosomes you have, all of that stuff. And your gender is your personal identity, what you feel like. I think if you're being open-minded, it's not that hard to imagine gender as being separate from sex. That was what I was hoping to illustrate with the leprechaun analogy I did in my last video. I'm pretty sure if you randomly woke up and you had different genitals, you wouldn't all of a sudden feel like a different gender. You would still feel like the same person with the same identity. You would just be physically different. Another proof that sex is different from gender is the fact that some people are intersex. For example, there was a writer / author / voice actor. Her name was Maddie Blaustein. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. She did a lot of voice acting for anime and things like that. But anyway, she was born intersex. I don't know the exact details of it, but she had both male and female biological attributes. And when she was born, the doctor assigned her male gender. I mean, maybe her male biological parts were more prominent. Who knows? But the fact is, both of them were there. And the doctor just made a choice to assign her male. As she grew up, she realized that she wasn't a man, she was a woman. When you're born, the doctor looks at you, they see what genitals you have, what organs you have, and they figure out your sex, and from that sex, they assign you a gender. Males are usually assigned boy, while females are assigned girl. But that assignment is arbitrary because your gender is not based on your sex, and many people grow up and realize that their assigned gender is not what they actually feel like. And the fact that there are intersex people, meaning people whose sex is ambiguous at birth, kind of proves that gender is separate from sex, because otherwise what would their gender be? None? No, it's just whatever they identify as. And then lastly, there are people that are willing to make that distinction between sex and gender, but it's really hard to really describe what gender is and how it's defined and how you identify as it, because in many ways gender is a social construct. Gender is sort of a combination of your personal gender identity as well as gender roles, and many gender roles are completely arbitrary, like the fact that women are more likely to wear dresses than men in our society. At least there's no reason whatsoever that a man can't wear a dress. That's just a gender role that has arbitrarily been perpetrated in our society. But then there are gender roles that are based on our biological sex, such as the fact that women are usually the main caretakers of children. I mean, that's just based on the biology of the female mammal. So all these things are related and they correlate to each other, but they're not the same thing. That's the main idea, is they're not the same. They interact with each other, but they're not the same thing. And they don't always match up one to one. Like I said in that video, there are people who are biological females who identify as women, but adopt male man gender roles. And I think one day, far down the line, gender as a construct will cease to be as significant in our society, because it is a construct, and constructs are only useful as long as society uses them. Kind of a rushed analogy I came up with. You can tell me if it's a bad analogy, but it kind of explains what I'm trying to say. So for example, like a stop sign is a social construct. The idea that we have to stop at certain intersections is a complete social construct. There's no objective reason why we need to stop at certain places on the land, but we've accepted that as a social construct. We take it seriously. We consider it legitimate. But think about this. Have you ever been on a road somewhere and you like come to an intersection and you're like, hey, there should really be a stop sign here. Or maybe there is a stop sign somewhere and you're like, why is there a stop sign here? There's no reason for there to be a stop sign here. We just know inherently that some things just don't fit. Even though it's a construct, even though it's something society came together and basically fabricated, we still somehow understand and know that sometimes things don't make sense. And that example may be a little bit easier to explain than someone's personal identity, but it's a similar thing, just to illustrate that just because something is a social construct does not mean that it's illegitimate, or that someone can't personally know that something is wrong about it without being able to completely identify and explain it. And then I briefly mentioned in the video, but there is lots of research that shows that there is some biological significance to gender that is different from biological significance of sex. If you want to read more about that and see some sources, I'll put some of those in the description. But really, at the end of the day, I don't think that gender is a biological concept. I think it's a psychological concept. And so we shouldn't be trying to completely define it through biology and DNA and cells and things like that. And just from a personal philosophy point of view, my strategy is when I hear a lot of people tell me their experience, I take them seriously. I don't just write them off as making things up or having a mental illness or just wanting to be different or wanting to get attention. To me, that's cynical and condescending. That's just the way I feel about it. Some people's strategy is to not believe anything anyone says until they have all of the evidence. But to me, I think that's just very cynical and non-constructive way to go through life. Anyway, thanks for watching another Redux video. As always, we can continue the conversation in comments, and I'll see you for the next video. Hello everyone, thanks once again for watching my video. For those that don't know, I'm a full-time YouTube creator, and the only way that I'm able to do this is through your support, and a large part of that support comes through Patreon. Patreon is a crowdfunding site for people like me who create things, and it's basically like an online tip jar where you can set it up to donate just a couple bucks every time I make a new video. If you find any value in my videos or my channel, or if you just want to support me, please consider signing up for Patreon. That would be amazing and totally appreciate it. And if you can't, that's cool too. I just thank you for watching.